So I saw Argylle and it was confusingly stupid. I'll be honest, I really wanted to like this. The premise for this movie is actually pretty intriguing. Basically, a spy novelist becomes the target of an evil spy organization when the books she wrote actually happen in real life. So now, another spy organization must come in and protect her from getting captured and killed by the spy organization. A lot of this story seems to be inspired by Ian Fleming's James Bond books, where the author actually tells his stories from his experience as a World War II officer. So I was colored impressed by this concept. The only thing preventing me from liking it were two components in the cogs. One of them being Matthew Vaughn. He's made some pretty good movies in the past. I liked Kick-Ass. I liked Kingsman. However, the second Kingsman movie was about as enjoyable as watching keys dangle in front of my face. The dude has a flashy and stylish way to shoot an action sequence, and out of all of them, they have the most flashy, style over substance of over-the-top vitality. That's not a bad thing. That's just a director's trademark style. Much like J.J. Abrams and his lens flares, or Zack Snyder and his slow motion shit. Every director has a quirk, both in cinematography and in the direction and written material. However, that's about what I expected out of Matthew Vaughn. In terms of plot and story and characters, not a whole lot. In fact, it's actually very all over the place. So Bryce Dallas Howard plays Ellie Conway, a novelist who writes spy fiction. Her book series being about a fictional super spy named Argylle who's stuck in the 80s with that flat shortcut but is super handsome, played by Henry Cavill. As she is about to visit her parents, she unfortunately gets roped into an espionage attack on her life as some goons attack her on a train, but another agent played by Sam Rockwell comes to her aid and gets her out of the scrape. He then tells her that her books actually happened in real life and that a crime syndicate called the Division is after her, as she can tell the future, or so she thinks. And they are after files that could expose their crimes, and Conway is the key to finding them. Problem is, she can only remember in the manuscripts. So they must follow her writings, which are the key to unlocking her past, and realize that this wild goose chase is more than she bargained for. So this story is basically Alan Wake meets Ian Fleming meets Enemy of the State meets Kingsman meets Killers meets Taylor Swift. No, seriously, look it up. I'm not gonna lie, I had fun with some parts of the movie. For one, Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell worked well in the movie. Their chemistry was dynamic, their back and forth dialogue is pretty good, with Rockwell providing some well-timed line delivery. Bryan Cranston as the evil syndicate leader is great. Hell, I like Bryan Cranston in general, however he was hardly in the movie. Catherine O'Hara is really good. However, Henry Cavill and John Cena were jarringly absent throughout the film. A lot of the actors in this do a good performance, no doubt. However, the same can't be said for Bryce Howard. There were definitely moments where her voice cracked. Even in her more dramatic scenes they feel almost rather cartoonish. And when she puts on a more serious performance, like in the end, it's usually outrageous. Her performance basically mirrors that of her previous roles, such as the crappy Jurassic World sequels and her Black Mirror episode Nosedive. She's alright, but her acting needs a little more improvement. I like some of the cinematography choices in this. There are flashback scenes that are filtered in grayscale, and they use color in some important objects, like the journal is a yellow book where the novelist writes her ideas in, and other stuff, and the hacker guy has green hair to indicate that he is another important figure. I wish there was more of that. Other than that, that's all my positives. This movie is frustrating, exhausting, overly flashy and nauseatingly messy. At times the movie is at war with itself to try and distinguish if it wants to be a meta take on the spy thriller genre, but by adding in the element that the main character is a struggling writer. Except, they drop the entire writer aspect almost halfway into the movie in favor of providing just a dull and ridiculous backstory for Conway. Now, I am aware that not everyone loves meta humor, and the whole meta-ness has become overly stale and overused. The whole writer takes a jab at the critic angle has been done before, and M. Night Shyamalan's The Lady in the Water proves that notion wholeheartedly, and Alan Wake does this as well. But I like the idea of a spy novelist getting roped into her own written nonsense because it's more fun that way. Take away that element and you're left with an even worse version of the Paul Feig movie Spy. I don't get why they couldn't have just left that part in, and they do it so that Conway's reality and the reality of her fictional character merge together, but really it just makes no sense as to how she, a brainwashed super agent, would write stories based on her life. The fact that they use hypnosis on her doesn't help matters because they forgot to hypno away the spy shit. So no wonder why this organization is so incompetent at their job. And the logistics of it working makes no sense either. There is a scene early on where one of the characters gets riddled with bullets and that she clearly just gets killed. But later on we see that Conway's fan mail gives her an idea to bring back that same dead character to life, by revealing that one of the bullets just missed her heart because she looked up what a heart looks like in the body. And that she uses that same idea on Sam Rockwell. How did she know to do that? And don't tell me it's because of amnesia, because by that time she was already recovering from the hypnosis and somehow had time to remember where his heart is located. Unless she happens to be dead shot, that is just BS. There's a shootout that happens on a ship and there is a cargo area that is full of thick black oil. Naturally everyone stops shooting so as to not ignite the oil and start moving up towards the heroes whilst slipping on the oil. But then Conway sticks daggers onto her shoes and starts sliding around the oil-drenched area as if it were an ice skating rink. First of all, how does that even work? They're daggers. And I don't think the same logic could apply to just using them as makeshift ice skates, let alone let them get dragged along the oil. Secondly, it's oil. It's not the same as ice as it is solid, not a liquid substance. Did the writers even use common sense when drawing up this scene? It comes off feeling like a DreamWorks movie rather than a tongue-in-cheek spy movie. I am also very disgusted by the rating of this movie. Unlike Matthew Vaughn's previous works like Kingsman and Kick-Ass, the movie is rated PG-13. That wouldn't be a bad thing if it wasn't for the many instances where violence occurs. Whenever people are shooting at each other, no one is sustaining bullet wounds and there is absolutely no blood shown. Now I've been used to bloodless carnage in previous movies now, Marvel movies in particular, but nowadays, I deserve to see some grit every once in a while. Like the actual grounded nature of reality seeping into the escapism, that's something I want. But no, everybody's getting shot at and no one is bleeding and nobody seems to care that they're killing people. Okay. For a spy parody, sure, but even for a parody there has to be stakes. And, in case anyone asks, no. This has nothing to do with suspending my disbelief. Because my disbelief had been suspended by the time the CGI cat was introduced. Speaking of which, the effects are bad. They are really bad. I just looked up the budget for this film and it sits around $200 million. $200 million. And they couldn't make the special effects look convincing. The biggest insult to injury is added when they inserted this weird motion blur to the effects. Everything was so blurry. I watched this with specs and I can tell you I'm not going crazy that we all saw that, right? And considering this Matthew Vaughn, get ready to hear his greatest hits playlist again, cause he inserts more music tracks in this than his previous films. Whereas the music in his previous films have class and fit the scenes perfectly, here the music comes off as pretentious and trying. Because when I think of a tense battle moment, I think of the Beatles. One more thing to add, the product placement was atrocious. This film is produced by Apple's film division, so imagine my shock when I kept seeing Apple devices in this movie. I mean it. The main character uses both a Mac computer and a MacBook. One of the villains uses an iPhone. Sam Rockwell uses an iPad. Bryan Cranston is taking photos of the notes using an iPhone 14 Pro. Call me crazy, but as far as I can tell, this was the most Aggressive use of marketing a product a brand company can do in a film production. Don't be surprised when Apple films suddenly become the next Sony films in terms of advertising their products. One last thing, stop doing this to Bryan Cranston, Hollywood. My man doesn't deserve to take this abuse. Anyway, yeah. That's about it. Argylle is not good. In fact, it is quite bad. Overall, the story sucks. The characters aren't memorable and are quite stupid and dumb. The presentation and effects on display looks cheap. I have pretty much lost all respect for Matthew Vaughn at this point. I don't care for any other discussion people have on this film, like the poster lied to you or that Henry Cavill and John Cena got replaced by Bryce Howard. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that this film surprised me, and not in a good way. This film is not making any of its money back, and I wouldn't be surprised if somehow the film will even be talked about in how not to release a script during a writer's strike. I'm giving this mess a 3/10. It's closer to a 2 than a 4. So, 2.5/10. Anyways. Thanks for watching, see you later, bye.